to line up, and also but basically any way that you use to get a good direction. The second part we call simplification, and that's about breaking down the leg ahead of you into a nice little checklist. So some key features that you're going to use, and that's where concepts like handrails, stepping stones, and attack points come into the picture. And an attack point is just like it is. So a stepping stone is some distinctive feature along your route, and you're going to step from one feature to the next, just like stepping stones across a river. And the final stepping stone is a really important one, and that's called the attack point. And that's really important because if you screw that up, you screw the control up. And a handrail is a very easy kind of stepping stone that is not just like a hill, then you have to go to the next hill. It's a line through the terrain. So a good example of a handrail could be a track. So those are the terms we're going to use to talk about simplification. And the third part of our breakdown for orienteering is knowing where you're going. And that's about knowing what is coming up before you get there. So not running into the forest and then trying to work out where you are, knowing what to look for before you make a move. And that's really important. And we're going to go through some examples about just to try to visualize being in that process of I've looked at the map, I know what's coming up, and I'm looking for it before I get there, as opposed to hitting it and then trying to work things out.
So if you've got a pen and paper, while Gene zooms us in on this next leg, I would write down 3 letters. I'd write down D, S, and K. D is the first part, that's direction. S is simplification. And K is know where you're going. So that's the basic checklist we run through in our head when we're trying to plan out the process for getting to the next control. And then I draw an arrow off S, and then I would write the letters R, A, and C. They stand for route choice, attack point, and C stands for control. We're going to go through that kind of checklist in that order. So we're going to go D, S, break it down to the RAC, and then a K for each of these example legs we've got coming up. Okay. Shall we jump into the first one, Gene?
Yeah, so this is a leg from a course in Whittle Forest, local to Auckland. And we're going to look at leg 10 to 11. So it's quite a challenging red leg. And I think as someone who's just been doing orange courses, you'll be right to feel a little bit unsure about how to do this one. But as a red level orienteer, there are some ways that you can make this a lot easier for yourself. So how does I'm going to take you through the way I would, I'm going to take you through the way I would think about this one. So let's start with direction. Number 10 is just on a small area of detail in what we've got over here is kind of a big, there's a high point over here, there's a hill, but it's not terribly distinctive. So the only thing you've got to get your direction right is your compass in this case. There's nothing else to use. You're going to be in the forest, there's trees around, you can't see that far. So your direction from 10 is purely a compass bearing. You've got to line that guy up really well. So the next part I'm thinking about is the simplification. How can I make 10 to 11 as easy as possible for me? I'm not trying to go out there and be a hero and go perfectly on the straight line the whole way and nail number 11. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for myself. So the things I'm thinking about, there's this high area that I mentioned at the start, so that there's a hill there. And then there's this really low area, this big depression through here. So you can see there's this quite a nice line through the terrain. So I would describe that as a handrail. You can follow this low point through quite safely. You've got a hill up this side and you've got a hill up the side, so you're just following the low point through.
And Gene, just to orient this to the whole DSK, so you've done your D, you're into your S, and you're working through R first. So you're choosing your route choice, then you're going to look for your attack point.
Yeah. So I'm doing maybe the simplification a little bit, just train of thought, but it's good to point out that what I'm really identifying is a nice route choice that I feel really safe doing. And so the next part of my route choice, I've got another handrail here that I'm following, and it's a track. And then I've got a key stepping stone here is the corner on the track. And this is really quite distinctive in the terrain. The track bails back, so that's a key stepping stone. Then the next stepping stone I'm looking for is this flat, low area here. And you can see it's up here, higher and higher up there. So it's fairly distinctive in the terrain. I think my attack point, I'd quite like to use this hill as my attack point. It's quite distinctive. It's the highest hill in the area, and I should be able to see it from the depression here. So, and then is that, we've gone through.
Yep, and then
that's my route choice. You can see my use of handrails and stepping stones and my attack point, and the control here is in a small reentrant. So it's heading downhill here, and it's quite high on the slope, but it's just this small reentrant close to the top of the hill. So I've got a bit of a visual picture of what my where the control flag will be placed in the terrain.
So at what point of the league are you figuring all this out, Gene? Where would you want to have thought through all of this by?
I think I would like to have most of this done pretty much at 10. So I'm not stampeding off with it, and I'm really on top of it. Hopefully I will have planned this stuff out earlier in the course. Whenever I had a spare moment, perhaps I'll be running on a track or something. Hey, how's my internet? I'm getting a message to say that. Okay. How's my internet, Tom? Is it?
You're a little bit fuzzy, but you're okay. We can sort of hear you.
Okay. Cool. So I would like to have, if I was feeling good on a good day, I would like to have this planned out at some stage earlier in the course. I think the most important thing about what I'm trying to say is I'm not having this planned out here. I'm not having this planned out by here. I'm having this planned out somewhere before 10. It's things that, or at 10. It's not something that I'm running on the fly. I've thought about this prior to stampeding off towards 11.
And that's where the K comes in, right? You've had a chance to know where you're going, so you can anticipate what you're going to see.
Third part, yes, that's right. How can you leave 10 if you know and under the light of know where you're going? So from the control, if I can imagine myself being there, and the first thing I'm doing is checking my direction, and I'm looking into the forest, and I know I'm expecting to see that high, vague hill system in front of me. So I know what I'm expecting to see before my under the light of the speed start moving. Then as I get the system, I know that I'm expecting the terrain.
Hey, Jane, just as a suggestion, it's Erin here, you might want to turn your video
before I get there, and being in the terrain going to be coming up, knowing that you're going down, left, right,
Hey, Jane, you're very Jane.
know what it is.
Gene, you're very laggy. What we might do is if you skip on to the next map.
Yep.
Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I just found with Zoom
Yeah.
using it, it's better if Gene turns his video off and just has his sound. It should be better. Yeah.
Great. Do you want to try that, Gene, and we'll skip to the next one?
No problem. All right, let's give that a try, and hopefully we can maintain a more consistent connection. Cool. So on to the next one, Tom.
Yep. So just to summarize again, so the system you've got is at the start of your leg, you want to think about what direction you're leaving the control. Before you leave the control, you want to simplify and you want to think in terms of what's a good route choice, what's a really good attack point, and what feature is the control on. Last of all, you remind yourself of K, which is knowing where you're going. So it's doing all of these things in advance and expecting to see things rather than spotting a hill and wondering, I wonder which hill that is, or I wonder which depression that is. You should have a plan in your head based on the plan that you've already made. I think we've lost Gene. Give him a moment to see if he can get back in. In the meantime, I have a backup, so just bear with me and I'll pull up the backup image. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Okay. Yep.
There we go.
Back on.
Okay.
I'm not yet. Not sure what happened there. Zoom just crashed and everything disappeared. All right, we're back.
Okay. Let's take us into this leg, Gene.
Cool. So this is an area used for nationals this year. Last year, in South Canterbury, and the terrain here is fairly hilly, as you can see, and the forest is mainly Kanuka trees, so the visibility isn't high like in some parts of our pine forests. It's not super high, and you can see there's some rocks around and some quite hilly patches. So we're going to focus on 12 to 13.
Yeah. So same as last time. So direction. So you've come from 11. You're getting compass. This is when you put your compass on your map. You orient your map. You turn your whole self and your whole body so that you're looking in the right direction. And when you're learning this, it's good to do this as the first step before you even start planning the rest of the leg. Then you're going to apply the simplification. You're going to think ARC, attack point, route choice, control. And for me, I think there is a couple of potential attack points here. I'll just pull up here.
Yeah,
so
it's going to depend on your route choice to some degree.
It is, yeah. I think one obvious route choice is coming down this spur and then trying to come up through here to the open, come down to the fence corner, and you've got a really obvious attack point on a fence corner. From there, you can hold your height and come around, and you know the controls on the edge of a green pocket of vegetation. So you've got route choice, attack point, and coming around into the control. And then, because I've planned this all at the start here, as I'm going along, I'm going to try and tick off a few things on the leg. So I'll tick off when I cross down in the bottom of the valley, when I hit the fence line, and my attack point. So they're essentially my stepping stones. That's how I do it. What do you think, Gene?
Yeah, I quite like that way. I think it's quite safe. I'm feeling confident, so I'm going to take a straighter approach. And again, yeah, I'll start by just describing what my approach for the direction would be. So, of course, I will use the compass here to get my direction out of 12, but you can also get your direction out of the control by using this large green area there, which I expect is a pile of fallen down trees or something similar. And because that's so close to number 12, I can basically hold on to that to get my exit out of the control through this gap. So, and I'm using my compass as well, and those two things will agree. So I've got a good direction out of the control using both the compass and the terrain. Now, the key things that I like on this leg that I think I'm going to aim for is this stream, this watercourse in the valley, this side valley, and I'm going to simplify this area here as just a whole lot of bushy green stuff. And I'm going to simplify out this other area here of denser vegetation. And also I'm going to use this reentrant again on the side of this much larger valley. So
you are feeling a lot more confident than I was.
Yeah, I'm going for it. So there's slightly more risk, but I think with those simplifications, I can pull together a fairly direct line. I also really like this cliff at the stream. I think that's going to be quite unique. There's no cliffs further down here. So and there's some other cliffs much further up, but I should be able to see that cliff that I really like from some distance away. It should really stand out because it's quite unique. There's no other cliff that's crossing over the stream like that. It might even be a bit of a waterfall.
So your know where you're going narrative will kind of be like, I'm going to grab on my compass and go between the green stuff. I'm going to keep the green stuff on my right down a gully. I'm going to cross over a cliff. I'm going to keep green stuff on my right until I hit a valley, and I'm going to go up.
Yeah, and this last bit, again, I'm liking using this green stuff. There's such good contrast between the green and the white, and that should be able to help. And now it's going to be I'm going to be using my compass in towards the end, and I think my attack point is going to be that final blob of green. So I'm going to line things up from the end of that green, and I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for another big blob of green, and I'm taking the compass in, but I am going to be extra cautious about getting that location correct. Okay. That's my attack point, and that's of the utmost importance.
Okay, so that's kind of two examples of how you can take a different approach to risk on a leg. You've used the same system, direction, simplification, know where you're going, and come to two very different ways to do a leg. Cool. Should we try another one on this map? What about that 9 to 10 leg?
Yep, we can do 9 to 10. What do that? So nine, this is what you mean, 9 to 10?
Yeah, that's the one up there.
That's quite easy. So we're going from, I can't zoom in anymore. That's it.
Because it applies to short legs as well, right? Like you still have to do the same DSK. It's not just for long legs.
Yep, so, and short isn't necessarily easier.
So like on this one, and like direction is almost more important, because you can imagine on a longer leg, if you make a slight mistake with your exit direction, suddenly you're way further away and you've got much less of an opportunity to correct before you make a parallel error. But for this one, so direction, obviously you punch the control, turn your whole body, look this way. Simplification, route choice, you've got this lovely river down here, so that's pretty obvious. You could potentially also run the route choice down the spur. But drop down to the river, attack point, track junction or river junction here, and then your controls on a cliff. So easy as get your direction, drop out, take your route choice along the river here, and then shimmy on up into the control.
So what are you using to, so yeah, in the light of know where you're going before you leave the stream to get the control?
So my know
really
where I'm
important
going,
to know exactly what is going to prompt you to leave the safety of the stream and head into number 10.
So I guess maybe that's the first big cliff in the river.
Yeah, there are two big cliffs, and I think this guy here is a really good attack point. It should oh yeah, now your drawings come up. Yeah, my route into this one, well, what I'd like to propose is another. Oh, so you did go down. Well, was that the one you presented, Tom? Down. Okay.
Yep.
The way I actually did this on the day was I stayed high and I used this big spur here as a handrail. So because the spur is creating a little ridge line in the terrain for me to run down, I can imagine that that's a track and I can follow it along. So I treated this big steep bit as, I simplified that as just big steep bit, and I stayed at the top of that. And then I simplified the spur as a little ridge line to run down. And then of course you're back at the junction where you can then use the cliff. So there are different ways to simplify this, and whatever you use, just make sure you're making those attack points and handrails as clear as possible.
Cool. Okay. Shall we do one more example? Do you want to jump to the next map?
Yeah, we'll jump to the next map.
While Jean's doing that, does anyone have any questions or comments about DSK and the way that kind of works, or ways that we've applied it, or terminology we've used that maybe you're not so clear on?
Hang on. We are not. Sorry. For some reason, the next image is not appearing.
Jane, sometimes you have to unshare and then share again.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up a new window and close the. Okay, so you probably should have lost.
Yep.
Lost that one, and
after we'll do this one, kind of me and Jean chatting about a couple of options, and then the one after that, anyone is interested, we'll probably have that as our last one. If anyone wanted to have a crack, either just drop me a message through the chat and we can get someone to have a little go. If there's any volunteers, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but one way to try out an option.
Okay, we're back on. Has my screen got through?
Yep, so we're looking at the
Cool.
Rototoa map.
So this is Rototoa, a map in Woodhill Forest in Auckland also. So some complex sand dune areas and also some slightly steeper sections. We're looking at leg 5 to 6 for this example.
Everyone just have a little think. Maybe we'll just take a couple of seconds just for you to have a little think in your head. How are you going to ascertain your direction? What are some good possible route choices you can see? What could you use as an attack point? What is the control on? And then how are you going to kind of schedule that story in your head so you know what to expect? So let's have a little think. Righty, Jean, what's your D? How are you going to ascertain your direction to leave 5?
So I quite like these pine forests for using a strong compass to get my direction. I think the forest is quite quite consistent and you're not being pushed around by much. So I'm pretty happy just to line the compass up on this one.
Cool.
As a second, compass basically.
Cool. So number 5 closest to you, number 6 straight out in front. Orient the map, turn your body. Cool.
Yeah.
Route choice wise, I can see maybe two good ones, I think, and a third one that you could do that's maybe a bit sketchy. What would you go for?
Yeah, I'm torn between getting onto the track along here. That's looking pretty tasty actually, because this area with the green stripe is going to be a little slower runnability compared to getting onto that track. So
what about this? There's also this handrail over here. What about this one? There's this handrail down the side. That's maybe an option as well. You could hop straight out that way along the bottom.
Yep, I've looked at that very briefly and decided that that's not a very appealing option. What I don't like about that is how vague it is to know when to come back up. So
there's no attack point, right?
There's no attack point from that direction. What's to stop me just drifting on off on forever?
How about with your track option? What's your attack point?
So I quite like this as not necessarily an attack point, but certainly a stepping stone, and that shape there with the knoll and that reentrant is going to springboard me off the track.
Is there anything else you might use? Any other things which you're going to pick up along the track to help?
Well, there's the corners are going to be key.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. You've got this wiggly ass bit of track, and then all of a sudden it goes straight.
Yep. And you could use the corners, and then find there's a route there to use the bridge and the hill as an option. But there are things to use.
Okay, so we've got our
down the other way. No.
R is the track. A is your little knoll next to the depression. C, the control is kind of tricky. This one.
It is a tricky control. This is the real deal. This is red level orienteering. So the control itself is on a small knoll. You can see it there in the center. So this map, I'm not quite sure what the contour interval is actually, but it's not going to be big, and we're in an area of undergrowth. So the ground is going to be not as clear as in this area over here, for example, that's just white. This area has a lot of cutty grass and branches on the ground, so it's not as clear exactly where the landforms are. So it's really important to have a really clear idea that you're looking for a little knoll. Behind the knoll is there's this high point around the back, and that's going to help catch you if you miss it. And it's really important to know the proportions of things in that control circle. So you've got some knolls before it, and you know how they're positioned to the knoll with the control on it, and you know how that's positioned relative to that higher point running around the edge of the circle.
So this one kind of illustrates why you have R, A, and C as components of simplification, because on the first map we talked about, attack points were quite important. The second one from Nationals, route choice was maybe a bit more of the important part, whereas here we see the real value of why identifying what your control is on is really important. Mm-hmm. Loads of the time, and we've all been there, we've all made control circle errors. We don't actually make the error in the control circle, we make the error at the previous control when we don't actually think about what we're expecting to see. So that's kind of why there's the 3 components to simplifying a leg, and Jean's illustrated the kind of things you might think about. And it also shows how, while this DSK RAC is quite clunky when you first start using it, and for some legs maybe you don't need to worry so much about one of the components, if you think about it for every leg, after a while you'll start to feel, I don't need to worry so much about that on this leg. Maybe I need a little bit more control on this one. If you're running on a gold mine map or a really tricky rock map, for example, C becomes super important. Actually with sprint orienteering, C becomes super important. Whereas on gully spur, it's all about your route choice. choosing like nice smooth lines with not too much climb.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You can easily imagine in this leg here having a good exit from the track, maybe even finding this depression in advance and just not having a clear mental image of exactly where that flag is positioned, and just faffing around in here for minutes and minutes. Easily done.
Cool. Shall we jump on? I'm just looking at the time, Gene. We've got about 10 minutes to go. Should we just jump on to the last map we're going to do as an example? And in the meantime, if anyone's got any questions, now's a really good time to ask, because we can have a go at trying to explain them with a worked example on this Okaraka map. Any questions from anyone, or queries about how we might apply this in different terrain or anything like that?
Hi Tom, it's Kylie. Can I start with a question?
Sure, fire away.
Yeah, it's just about using it when you're relying on it, taking a bearing. So you're heading off in the direction, you can't really see any features ahead of you that you want to aim for, and you're taking a bearing. How reliably can most people who are amateurs sort of run on a bearing before they start veering off? I mean, can you run on a bearing for 300 meters, or is it only for the 50 meters or 100 meters most people could do without veering off too much? Do you look up ahead and try and see something at distance and aim for that like you would, climbing a mountain? What are your tips around that?
Yeah, I think it's super variable. Some people are much better at it than others. I'm horrendous myself, so I have to rely really heavily on what you just mentioned. So for me, when I do this and apply it when I'm orienteering, I do the D for me is about getting my compass on the map, turning to orient the way I want to go, looking up and picking out something I want to run to, and then I kind of put my mental attention to the S and the K, so that I've safely taken a bearing from a known point. I've bought myself 100 meters or 50 meters, depending on what the terrain's like, and I'll head off that way. And then I think about all the other stuff while I'm going. Sometimes in pine forest, if you're traveling slightly oblique to the lines of the trees, it can be super hard to keep going in a straight line. So I think your point about trying to pick out something in the distance is really, really important. So that would be probably what I do. I don't know about you, Gene.
Yeah, to answer the question directly, how far can someone go? A very long way. And I think your question was specifically how far can, say, someone who's doing orange level orienteering, maybe moving up to red, how far can they expect? A lot longer than they think. And I think you can have quite a rapid breakthrough with the right coach in the forest, just to take you through a really disciplined approach to using the compass. And that might cause you to go slower than you're used to going. You might have to stop more frequently and check the compass again, standing still. But a really disciplined approach to taking the compass and not running off before you're ready, I think you can exceed your expectations on how far you can get. I think there's some psychological challenges around being that disciplined against the clock. But yeah, I think with the right coach, I think you can exceed your expectations.
Does that help, Kyle? Does that sort of give you?
That's sort of what I thought you might say. And of course, you need a decent compass too, not one that the needle's swinging around wildly all the time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, something that will give you something will work in terrain. Cool. Anyone else got any other questions or queries at the moment? Otherwise, we'll do one last kind of worked example, and then we'll kind of recap and finish up.
Cool. I'll lead away.
Yeah, go for it, Gene. What are you going to do on this league?
So as I'm leaving number one here, the compass is not terribly interesting to me, because there's this really, really obvious group of trees in this valley here. So you've got the contours, you've got a big valley here, and you've got the group of trees, and that's going to be visible a mile away. So that's my direction out of the control. I'm running straight towards those trees.
Cool. I would probably always just put my compass on there just to be doubly sure, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yep. The simplification I'm looking for at the start, Yep, it's going to focus around, I think, the trees as the first stepping stone, this depression and the slope behind it as the second stepping stone. That's all pretty easy. But I think why this leg is quite interesting is because the stepping stones from here on have to be very precise. And the reasons why is because looking at this terrain, there are a lot of very similar hills. This guy, these guys, that guy, that guy. And even the spurs leading into these hills are all very, very similar. So knowing the right simplification is really key here. You can't just say, I'm going to run to the left of the round hill. That is not going to cut it. So for me, I'm looking for things that really stand out. What is unique in this terrain? What will set one stepping stone or handrail apart from the false ones? So the things I really like here is actually this stream with the boulder, this watercourse with the boulder. And it doesn't seem that significant when you've got these big hills around, but it's unique. There is only one boulder beside a watercourse. So, and it's quite, should be quite visible from my previous stepping stone. What I like then is this round hill with the long ridge behind it. So there's almost no separation between those two stepping stones. And I think that's really important here, because if I was to use that boulder and then my next stepping stone was going to be, say, one of these spurs, that guy or that guy, looking across here, I could drift and hit the wrong one. I could drift on this one, that guy, that guy, that guy. It's not reliable. We have to be really specific here. So just delete those. So I really like using this guy. Then my route choice is just going to follow this guy the whole way up and over. Super safe. There's no chance of me jumping over to the next ridge to the southwest or to the northeast. I'm just going to stick on this ridge as if it is a track, as if there is a full vehicle track going along that ridge line up, all the way up to the hilltop. I'm following it the whole way through.
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna be a bit more of a basic guy. I'm gonna say, if you come up over this way, so same, I do the D the same, but I reckon with my route choice, if I go low and I avoid all of that noisy stuff you've talked about, come round, come up these tracks, and then I'm basically at the control. I've like avoided all of that. I've got a nice smooth line with some little bits of track to run, and then I've also got a nice flat area. I can see this big hill here. That's probably my attack point, that big hill, and I can just scoot into the control.
Yep, that pond's really good as well. That's going to stand out. That is unique.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two quite different approaches. One involves discipline and you get the reward of covering less distance, and the other is safer, going wide. Up for you to decide. Oh, and yeah, so the know where you're going part of all this would be to visualize, when I'm at one stepping stone, what is the next thing I'm looking forward to? So at the start, I'm running through the trees, and then I'm looking forward to the slope coming up in front of me. As I crest the slope here, I'm looking forward to the stream with the boulder. So I'm looking up ahead of me. I'm not just looking at my feet. I'm using my eyes. Then I know in advance that I'm looking from the boulder, I'm looking for this ridge line, following it all the way up. When I'm at the hilltops, I know I'm looking for the pond. When I'm at the pond, I know I'm looking for the saddle with the controls. So
same with, you can do the same on this one too. Always looking for little bits of track just in front of you and trying to keep this hill on your right. So I'd know exit, I'm going to hit a track, and then I'm going to carry on slightly to the left of all the hills. I'm going to look for track. I'm going to anticipate these as I go around the corner, anticipate the lake, and then pop into the control.
Yeah, cool. You can really see what it means to be a handrail in that route choice around the side here. You can imagine just with your right hand holding on to the side of that steep slope as if you're going down a steep staircase, just holding on to that rail the whole way along. Don't let go.
Cool. All right. Now, before we kind of summarize, does anyone have any last questions? All good. If you do, you can always drop me or Jean an email or a message. But this was supposed to provide an overview to a way that you can organize your orienteering. You should try and apply this to every leg, be it long or short. Once you've punched the control, think about your direction, which way you're going to leave. Simplify the leg using the route choice attack point control process, different percentages of each depending on what the leg looks like. And then last of all, you should know where you're going. You should anticipate what you're going to see rather than trying to relate what's in front of you to what you are wanting to see. It's slow to start with, but just like a tennis serve, if you're having to break it down to the parts, you're going to get a bit worse, but your limits are going to be removed and you're going to be able to go much faster in the end. Okay. If people have any feedback or anything like that, or have other topics they'd like to do, me and Jean might have a chat about trying to fit those in. But I think a couple of follow-ups on this will be focused at the aspiring Red Devil Orienteer. Okay. Thanks for coming along, everyone.
Cool. Thank you. I'm just going to be sitting around having a cup of tea. So if people do want to just hang around and ask some questions, how does that sound? I'll just sit around for a while.
All good.
Yep.
If you want to take off, feel free. Otherwise, Jean can take some questions.
See you.
Thanks, Jean. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love you guys.